We're all being called to really sit with the amount of grief that the world is undergoing. And through that grieving process, I think we open to a transformation of different ways of being. We have choices about how we show up. We can live in the fear of the future world that may or may not come to be, or we could be very fiercely present with each other and build connections and use that as a source of resilience to get through what may come in the future. A lot of the steps are really about getting into what still exists, what's here, what relationships are still available. And to do that, a lot of the steps involve self-work, developing relationships with uncertainty, and really just trying to figure out what it means to be alive in a time and place of such deep transition.
Right. Did everyone hear it?
All right.
Wonderful. So
thank you for your patience on that.
That trailer was made by our friend and colleague, Katie Flint, who is on this call.
Yay, Katie. Woo. Yeah, give everybody a wave. Yeah, and there's a roof. I love it.
Katie's making a documentary about climate grief. And so we're very excited. And yes, we can share the link. I'll be a little bit slow because I'm managing both, but certainly we'll share a link. And in addition to gratitude for our dear friend Katie Flint, we know that some of you might not know us. We know that a lot of you in this space do know us. And so we'll start with a little introduction. And we want to read our bios from the book. Mostly I want to read my bio from my book.
I'm going to read her bio.
Can I start with yours though?
Yeah.
Read yours first?
Yeah, for sure. And she's going to read mine. So it'll be kind of a mind game for you.
So Aimee is in the pink. Aimee is my wife. And Aimee is the co-founder of Good Grief Network and the heart behind the 10 Steps to Resilience and Empowerment in a Chaotic Climate program and the Flow Facilitation Training Modality. She was born and raised in Adrian, Michigan, and is the proud auntie of 4 amazing nephews. Aimee is an edgy and reverent contemplative, a healer, and a yoga and intuitive movement instructor. She maintains a regular dance practice because she learned from Alice Walker that hard times require furious dancing. In her free time, Aimee DJs under the name Existential. Aimee received her bachelor's degree in English, poetry, and religion from Central Michigan University before obtaining her MFA in creative nonfiction from Georgia College and State University.
All right. Thank you, Laura.
Ooh, just need a beer break.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I am excited to introduce my wife, LaUra Schmidt. Laura is the founder of the Good Grief Network and the brain behind the 10 Steps to Resilience and Empowerment in a Chaotic Climate program and the Flow Facilitation Training Modality. She is a truth seeker, community builder, cultural critic, trainer, and facilitator. As the granddaughter and grandniece of Holocaust survivors, Laura has long been captivated by the human condition. She is a lifelong student, curator, and practitioner of personal and collective resilience strategies. Inspiration finds her in natural landscapes and honest, open-hearted dialogue. Laura grew up in rural Michigan and graduated with a BS in environmental studies, biology, and religious studies from Central Michigan University. Her MS is in environmental humanities from the University of Utah. She holds certificates in integrative integrative somatic trauma therapy. Ooh, that's a mouthful. And climate psychology. When Laura isn't watching nature documentaries or eating burritos, she is adventuring with her 2 naughty rescue pups, Gus and Romeo.
It's the best part. All right. Thank you, folks, for being here. Thank you for letting us introduce ourselves to you. It is good to see your faces. We did not do this book alone. We had a lot of community support and a lot of help. And we will introduce our third author. We'll actually spotlight her.
Yes.
So I'm going to take a minute and do that. Aimee, can you pull up
I
Chelsea's
can.
bio? Let me find.
I'm already on it.
Oh, you're too quick. Let me find Chelsea's bio. Chelsie, I don't even see you.
I see her
I'm
right there.
here. And you know what's so funny is that I was going to say that Laura's the brain of the program and Aimee's the heart, but you all wrote it yourselves. That's how you know we've been working together on this book for years.
Yeah, Chelsie, I still, oh, because you're under book launch guest, so you're not under Chelsie.
Oh,
Well, Chelsie spotlighted.
Sarah, is that you?
It is. I'm kind of managing tech quietly on the side.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you.
All right, Chelsie spotlighted. So let's introduce
All
our
right, it is-
co-author, Chelsie.
Yes, it's my honor and my pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Chelsie Rivera. Chelsie is a writer originally from Frankfort, Kentucky. She received her MFA in fiction writing at Georgia College and State University, where she found a hiking buddy, lifelong friend, and now co-author in Aimee. She currently lives in San Diego County. When she's not writing, she can be found backpacking, surfing, or increasing her collection of pet spiders against her husband's wishes. They make excellent writing companions.
Welcome.
I love
Chelsie.
that. Thank you, Chelsie.
thank you.
We're going to be in conversation with Chelsie in just a little while, but we wanted to make sure that you knew who really helped us get here. And then we'll do a couple more introductions along the way. Sarah, are you willing to help us spotlight Rebecca? I can try to do it too. Let's see. Yeah,
There
there's
she
Rebecca.
is. Hi,
All right.
Rebecca.
Rebecca is our agent.
Hi guys.
Is a senior literary manager for United Talent Agency. She represents lots of great authors, including Holly Whitaker, who wrote Quit Like a Woman, and Catherine Morgan Scheffler, who wrote The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control. She was born and raised in Montreal and began her career as a lawyer, which we didn't know. I think but we were reminded, and then practicing media and intellectual property law. And in a previous life, she had a short stint as a road manager for an MTV comedy show. Also learned that today. Rebecca is amazing and approached us to write this book. And I can honestly say that this book would not exist without Rebecca and without her steadfastness. I think we tried to give her every reason not to write the book, and Rebecca.
And why we couldn't do it. And she was like, no, you need to, and you're going to do it now. And we're like, okay, we'll ask our friend Chelsie to help us. And here it is, years later, finally the birthday of the book.
Yeah, and it's I hope you guys are really proud of what you did, and I'm glad that you did it because it's an amazing book and it's beautiful, and it's going to be, and I think, an incredible tool for a lot of people during, difficult times. So thank you for including me in this celebration, and congratulations.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Right. Let's get into the content of the book. So, is Sarah J. Ray here? Yeah, Sarah's here. All right.
Present.
I don't see her, I just hear her. Oh, there you are. Hi, Sarah.
I'm going to introduce Sarah, who is a
Hi.
Great to see you.
Hi. So good to be here.
Sorry, just really like talking. I'm going to read your bio and then pass the floor over to you to lead us through kind of our introductory stuff. Is that okay?
I'm so excited. This is so fun already.
Dr. Sarah J. Ray is a professor of environmental studies at Cal Poly Humboldt in Arcata, California, in Wyote Territory. She works at the intersection of social justice and climate emotions, an environmental humanist with a BA in religious studies, an MA in American Studies, and a PhD in environmental sciences, studies and policy. Dr. Ray draws on an eclectic range of disciplines and epistemologies in service of climate justice. She's an author of 2 books, The Ecological Other, Environmental Exclusion in American Culture, on environmentalist disgust and social justice, and A Field Guide to Climate Anxiety, How to Keep Your Cool on a Warming Planet, an existential toolkit for the climate generation. Ray offers a professional development workshop to help center emotions in climate work called the Climate Wisdom Lab, and is a certified mindfulness teacher through the UCLA Mindfulness Awareness Research Center. Dr. Ray has published on emotions and climate justice in the LA Times, Scientific American, the Cairo Review of Global Affairs, Edge Effects, lots of things I can't pronounce, and One Earth Sangha. So,
all right.
Sarah, thank you for being here. Thanks for uplifting our book, and we'll turn it over to you for just a short while.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh my gosh. So something about when we get together, the three of us, I get so buzzed up. I feel like electricity in my follicles. I don't know. Is that a thing? And you got it. And we had a wonderful time. I've of course been following your work for a very long time and been aware of it for a very long time, been in conversation with you both for a very long time, and then had the real distinct honor and pleasure of being on your podcast. It feels like years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And I finally got on Zoom with you both, and we just had a wonderful time. And it feels like that again. So I'm all like, and meanwhile, I'm going to launch us into like a meditation where I'll calm down. So I'm going to have to do that a little bit myself. But what an honor to be asked to do this and to share this time with you, and to spend some time maybe doing some grounding that is really inspired by your work. You also asked me to do a little bit of an introduction to the book, which I'll do after we do some grounding. But I wanted to just point to the place in your book where you talk about meditation. And I just love the fact that the subheading of this section is, it's time we talked about meditation. So that gives you a little flavor of the kind of ways that you go about this. We don't even talk about it till page 197. So I think it's pretty amazing that you want to start your book launch with a little bit of meditation with me. So if that's something that sounds like fun for everybody, I hope so. Hopefully it's super accessible. I wanted to also just point out that if you're interested in thinking about meditation and mindfulness around climate emotions, this is something I'm super passionate about. So please reach out to me. I'd love to find other like-minded people to talk about this with. And in the beginning of your chapter on step 6, you quote Rachel Carson, and I want to lead us in a little bit of a meditation in a moment about her words that you speak of and you write about beautifully about the concept of attention. And attention is a theme that threads throughout the book, and it's so beautiful. It's informed by mindfulness, it's informed by neuroaffective science, it's informed by psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma theory, and also, of course, Buddhist thought. So I just, from my perspective, all of that just makes me so happy. And so I really wanted to hone in on a really key theme of your book, which is attention. And the quote from Rachel Carson that is the epigraph for that chapter is this: the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we will have for destruction. So the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for destruction. And that's kind of the quote that I want to use to sort of hang a little bit of a grounding meditation around. I'll guide you through this. The work of Aimee Brown, one of my favorite writers and thinkers, also is very much part of your book. And one of the things I wanted to evoke about your book is how beautifully researched it is, but you would never know. It doesn't hit you over the head like a scholarly tome, the way I was trained to write as an academic. It is utterly the opposite end of the spectrum. It's actually poetic. It actually feels like warm water in the shower. And Aimee Brown's ideas are threaded throughout your book in such beautiful ways. And one of her principles of emergent strategy, which is the name of one of her books, Emergent Strategy, is that what we pay attention to grows. And so for her, attention is the greatest resource that we have every single day, that we have access to this power to build this world that we desire, which is really what this book is about. And of course, negativity bias that's in the news and negativity bias, our attention really is towards how bad things are. And you draw on the work of one of your mentors, Joanna Macy. Many people in this room are probably familiar with Joanna Macy's work, who talks about the different stories of now, the story of the great unraveling and the story of business as usual, and the story of the great turning. And the world that we live in, the news we consume every day, and in addition, our reptilian brain who wants to focus on it, is really living always in the story of the great unraveling, where everything is sort of leaning towards apocalypse. But I want to suggest in this meditation and also in this book that of course we must and we can put our attention towards the things that we love, that we are afraid that the great unraveling is threatened, the things that we grieve. We know that we can do work to nurture and have those things flourish. What we pay attention to grows. And that this way we can use our attention to lean in to what Macy calls the great turning. So this building this muscle, it's a practice like anything else, which is of course why meditation comes up in the book and all kinds of practices come up in the book. A trick that I learned from my teacher, Heidi Bourne, is to notice when we're getting caught up in stories that don't serve us. And meditation really helps us do that. And I want to experiment with that with you all in a minute. These stories may be about how terrible the world is, the great unraveling. They might be the messages that we've internalized from society or our families or our histories about our personal shame and how unlovable we are. These stories may be deeply personal, or maybe they're profoundly global, political, large scale. They often trap us in shame and hopelessness. I know that that's a lot of what I'm working with my students. And we all have them. We all have these stories. So the invitation is always to ask ourselves, as my teacher Heidi Bourne always says to me whenever I get down my pit of despair and hopelessness and unlovability, what else is true? What else is true? So setting aside for a moment whether the stories that we live in are true or not, it's a far easier ask, in fact, to open ourselves to the possibility that even if they are true, there's a lot of other stuff that's also true. And the stories that we live in very much shape the energy, the attention, the focus, our actions, what we're going to go do in the world every single day. So attention, stories, what we focus on grows. And this is where I really think a grounding meditation might be fun to explore. So let's do that. What else is true? So relaxing in whatever position is most comfortable for you. It might be just exactly as you are right now. That's fine. If you like, you can sit back in your chair and take those couple of deep breaths that help you put a cushion between all that heady stuff and this focused time we're going to spend in your body. You could even lie down. You could stand up. If you'd like, you can close your eyes or not. You know what your body needs to feel comfortable. If it's accessible to you, you can imagine this relaxation of the muscles all around your eyebrows, between your eyebrows, around the micro muscles around your eyes, even all the little follicles of your eyelashes, just all relaxing. Just a little bit of invitation to transition to a different way of being and knowing than the screens on Zoom and book reading and all the theory I just threw at you. I'm just letting that all go. Letting the tension that it might be holding in your body relax. Taking a couple focused, deep breaths into the belly. Seeing if it's possible to really relax your belly muscles as the air goes into them. It's a really vulnerable thing to do. If it's not accessible, that's just fine. No judgment. This is just a gentle invitation to the body to awaken a little bit and the mind to soften. You might be noticing some stimulus coming in through some of your senses, your eyes, seeing shadows and lights if they're closed. Some sounds near or far. Maybe some temperatures or textures or pressure where you feel your body touching something. And it's sometimes tempting to judge these things that you're perceiving. Maybe your temperature is perfect and you never want it to change. Or maybe there's a sound and you feel annoyed by it. No need to control those things or judge them, just noticing them. This dance of clinging to and rejecting the stimulus is what it really means to be human. And with compassion, the invitation is just to explore the realm of the senses and how it feels to be in your body. And to whatever extent you can, without judgment. And as you continue to breathe, let's go back to this question of what else is true? How can we live in a story that supports this great turning that we're all part of? Imagine the molecules of oxygen that you're taking in with your breath, where they come from, the processes that they've undergone to become what they are. Photosynthesis, the exhalation of a plant or algae, this mutual breathing you're doing with this miraculous flora. Please. And this ocean that provides most of the oxygen we breathe and our lungs, our blood, inviting this perception of your physical connection with ecosystems, with the phytoplankton. We are able to touch this material world that is so far away from us through our breath. See if you can find any relief in this seemingly passive participation, this dance that you're doing with the web of life. Whenever you close your eyes and take a deep breath, this is available to you. You can shift your attention toward manifesting the great turning with every breath, with every wider perception of this inheritance, this notion of what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. What's possible when we can perceive in each breath the bottom of the ocean, the physical connection of our body to the earth across time and space. This miracle is also what is true. As we come to a close, whether or not you found this invitation of grounding your body in interbeing accessible or not. You always have this option of attuning to beauty in the world, attuning to your connection as a counterbalance of your attention to all that's wrong. And I'll close with a quote from the book by Terry Tempest Williams that captures this option available to us around how we spend our attention. She says, finding beauty in a broken world is creating beauty in the world we find. And so as you're able, as you desire, with no rush, we can come back together. Feel the electricity start to come back to my scalp. May all things find peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. I didn't realize how much I needed that.
We were quite.
Not always the way it is. Every time I sit to meditate, I think, I don't need this. And then I'm done and I'm like, God, I needed that. Thank you for letting me do that. If you want me to talk a little bit about the book too, I know that's part of my instructions, but I'm happy to do whatever you want to right now.
I have one proposal that we bring Chelsie on and spotlight Chelsie, and then we can hear a little bit about the book and then have a conversation.
Perfect.
Right.
Hi, Chelsie.
Hello. Thank you
Laura.
for that wonderful meditation. That was great.
Oh, Aimee would like to start with a cheers before we proceed.
We did the meditation. I feel grounded, and now I'm excited to celebrate. I hope everyone has a drink of their choice: water, tea, beer, wine, mixed drink, whatever floats your boat. And I just want to propose a cheers that this book is being born today. It was the hardest journey of my life, and to see it being born and celebrated in community with 76 people is such an honor and a dream. And cheers to the book.
Cheers to the book.
To the book and to the authors.
Yay!
Woo-hoo!
Thanks, folks.
Thank you for that.
So to preface why we've asked Sarah to come on board, Sarah was our first reader other than the three of us and our many editors. I felt really scared about showing it publicly. I don't consider myself a writer, and we had just so many setbacks, and it was a really difficult project for us. And so I sent Sarah an email saying, like, please read this tenderly. Like, it's not my best work. I'm trying to do something here. And Sarah just responded with glowing reviews, and it was so touching. And Sarah was such a safe person to receive those words, and it gave me courage to reach out to more people. So Sarah, thank you. Thank you for being the person that was safe enough to send a really insecure email to, and thanks for responding with strength and courage and
generosity.
So
I have to respond to that. I'm going to cry. I didn't expect any of that, but it was such a pleasure. I loved it. I'm pretty sure I used a lot of cuss words when I described my response to it, but I won't say them here.
Those to be the actual blurb, but it turns out you can't use cuss words in blurbs. I mean, maybe you can, but
could you remind us what you said?
I'll put it in the chat just in case there's any little ones listening.
Love it.
Yeah. Are you really putting it in the chat? Thank you. Thanks for putting it in the chat.
Yes, thank you for that.
Oh, yes, thank you. So yeah, like this is just free form conversation about either the structure or what moves us, or having it come together. Like Sarah wrote a book about it as well. We're just trying to build something community oriented here and help people move through the heavy and painful emotions that so many of us are feeling and oftentimes feel really isolated about. So I don't have any prompts even. I'm just wondering, maybe Sarah, you bring up something and we can riff off that.
And if that's too much
Sure.
pressure, I have a.
No, that's not pressure, that's excitement. I love it. I love this book so much. And I use some inarticulate modifiers for that because that's how much my emotion overwhelmed me. So I had to use those expletives. So, I wrote a book on climate anxiety, but actually this is the book I wish I had written. This is so beautiful. I'm such an academic and I couldn't shed that. This is what everyone needs. This is the one everyone needs. This is the one you can read. Like I said, the language, the writing. My perspective comes from a professor who works with students from the perspective of academia. This book comes from a perspective of two people who've been grappling with these issues on the front lines in their lives, have their own stories of trauma, their own stories of the journey through this stuff that are really, really intimate, and have been now doing this through the work of the Good Grief Network for a long time. And that perspective, I think your editor, your agent probably saw this in you, and this is why she kept bugging you to write the book. The perspective is very unique, very important. And that's why everybody wanted you to write this book. Because you all need to write the book so we cannot, for those of us who don't go through your program, we want the book version, right? And it was just, it came at the right time. It came after just the right amount of experience and immersion in that you could finally sit back and reflect on where this has all gone for you, what the story of it. So beautiful. No one else is doing anything like the Good Grief Network. That's the other thing. As you know, from people who are working with the Good Grief Network, the need for this stuff is just mounting exponentially. And the services that are coming to support people through this are slow to respond, and it's very hard to access. And you're doing everything you can to not do a therapy model. You're doing something completely different, a collective model. So the places where these conversations normally happen, you're doing something radically different. And I think that that's going to be, everybody is following suit. Everyone's thinking, okay, Good Grief Network, they can't do all of this. They're going to need more people. Another thing, and so that's where the training and all of this is launching from. So the intimate experience of what it's been like to be on the inside as you through this journey is just a so powerful part of this book. Another thing that I think is incredibly important to bring up, and then I will shut up so that we can have a conversation to talk all day about it, is the real centrality, which is very unusual in climate emotions space, on questions of justice and intersectionality. And I'll maybe just leave it at that and say that's unusual, and you guys do that, and it's really important and it's beautifully done. So if that's a conversation that people want to keep going in, we can I'll just open it up. How does the book do that? Why is that important? All that kind of stuff. But I'll just state that is a very unusual contribution and intervention of the book. So spoken like an academic, I'll stop now. Wherever you want to go on any of those things, or maybe somebody else wants to bring up.
I'm so glad that you brought up the intersectionality that's involved, because when LaUra and I first met, had just turned 20. LaUra was 22. We were just little babies. And, we were trying to figure out, she was an environmental activist and I was a human rights activist. And almost immediately from the time we met, we started arguing which was more important. And I feel like that argument went on for years. And as we dug deeper and deeper and deeper, we were like, oh my God, they're connected. Like, turns out it's all interrelated, and goes back to this deep disconnection we're feeling from self and others, and that forgetting that inner being, as you mentioned, from Thich Nhat Hanh. I feel like I've told that story to all our flow facilitators, and they're all on this call. We've been doing meetings with our flow facilitators. And I also wanted to mention that you talked about how we're growing exponentially. We just trained our biggest cohort of flow facilitators, so we will be ready to meet the demand that's coming at us.
We are not ready to meet the demand.
We will be more ready to meet the demand. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up and for your incredibly kind words.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I'll just add from the perspective of putting the book together. I think there were so many times that I said to Laura while we were writing, this book is the theory of everything, because everything is so connected to the environment. And I really enjoy that about the program and the book as well. The steps in the program very much build on top of one another and are interconnected. So it was a constant challenge figuring out which content belonged where. But I think the beauty of that was that you can really go back once you've read through the book or completed the program and done the steps, and look back at previous steps in the program and really deepen your understanding and those tools, and just continue finding and developing your sense of place in this really wild time that we're living in. So yeah.
Chelsie, I think it's important to lift Chelsie up here too, because Chelsie really helped us organize this. She created the structure, she created an outline for us to follow, and we met for maybe a year, once a week, every year for several hours, and we would just tell her, we want it in this way, we want this story, we want this story, and Chelsie really like sat back and really made the structure and the outline for us. And I think the outline works really well. I think it flows between personal narrative and theory. Aimee and I balance each other out really well. Aimee is, we said she was the heart behind Good Grief, basically, and I'm the brains behind Good Grief. So I kept pushing more theory, and Aimee and Chelsie, who are creative writers, kept pushing more story. We need story to connect to people. And so what ends up is this narrative of Aimee and I switching off and telling stories about our lives and about how we try to live open-heartedly, even though our hearts break all the time, by just trying to be in this world that is really full of pain, but also full of beauty, like Sarah reminded us. It's both and, it's not either or.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Which is a section in the book, both and, either or. You can find it in there.
Yeah.
Right, and while we're on the topic, community, at Good Grief Network, I've really observed how community breeds courage, and Chelsie being a part of the community, forming a community with us on this book, allowed me to tell stories I didn't think I could, because she was sitting there reminding me, not as a fellow writer, but as a friend, a trusted friend, saying, Aimee, this is going to help people. And I can't thank you enough for that, Chelsie. And also, to call you a third author is an understatement.
Well, thank you so much. That's my personal favorite part of this book. I'm obviously biased because we're friends, but I really do think that there's so much that's universal about both of your lived experiences, and I find it very admirable, the vulnerability that you showed by sharing those. So that's definitely my favorite part of the book, is just these personal stories that really illustrate the steps. And also I did go through the 10-step program. The time of writing was 2020, and so it was the perfect timing to have a support group for everything falling apart. And I got to really see the sense of community and very personal feeling of sitting with people and sharing these feelings. And I really wanted to help you all bring that to life in the book as well. So I think sharing your personal stories really gives that sense of sitting in the circle and hearing other people speak to their personal experiences when you go to the program in person. So
Thank you.
Do you want to tell why Chelsie is our non-ghost ghostwriter and like why Chelsie is our author? Just to help your friend from.
Yeah, so right around the time Rebecca was pushing us to write this book.
Pushing lovingly.
Yeah,
Pushing.
thank you for clarifying in case there was any doubt. Lovingly pushing for the book. Right around that time, our lives were falling apart and we just had a ton of really hard things going on. I was having a ton of health problems. And
pandemic,
the pandemic, it just, everything seemed like it was falling apart, and I was not up to the task of writing. And as someone with an MFA, to not be able to write my own book was excruciating. And so that's where it was amazing to have a friend from my MFA program who's just as picky about words and sentences and all of that as I am. I called up Chelsie and just was like, hey, does this interest you at all? And she was instantly a yes. She didn't even have to think about it. She didn't have to hear the conditions of it. She just said, yes, how can I help you bring this to life? And I feel like when I read my sections, it feels like I wrote it. Like she captured my voice, my heart. You just did better than I could have asked for, Chelsie.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that it turned out that way. And it was such a unique experience also bringing both of your very different voices and perspectives into the book and into balance. So I think there's something in the book for everyone. If you're more on the emotional meditation, I don't know how to put that, soft side of the brain, or whether you're more logical and looking for evidence-based theories. I think there's both of those things are in the book for everybody. So
thanks.
I see a question from our dear friend Michael, who wants us to talk a little bit about environmental justice and intersectionality. And Sarah, you offered to lead that. Will you give your perspective?
Oh yes.
Sure. I mean, but I really hope that you will take the floor, because this your voices in this book on that topic is what's so exciting. So maybe I'll try to, since you've asked me to do that, I'll try to set you up for doing that. But I should say that the very common thing for, as you experienced in the beginning of your relationship, Aimee and LaUra, that there's a sort of inner battle for all kinds of reasons between environmental and social justice concerns. And this is historic. There are reasons for this. The environmental justice movement that came out of the civil rights movement can attest to all that. This histories are written in lots of places. And the whys and hows and whats of that is all, out there to be researched and looked at. But how then do the twain meet, right? I mean, how do we figure it out? And I think what's very interesting that, of course, theoretically, in terms of theory, they're interconnected, as you came to realize. And lots of people are saying, hey, everybody, these should be connected. Don't you see how the environmental and social justice aspects of all these crises are interconnected? And systems theory folks have been trying to see that. Environmental justice folks have seen that. The new climate justice movement is seeing that. I would say that a whole generation called Gen Z gets that kind of intuitively in a way that previous generations don't. And I might be saying that maybe too strongly, but that's a focus of my own area of interest. And the part of the thing that's been fascinating is as the sort of focus in the climate movement has turned towards a lot of the emotional intelligence stuff, right? What are the emotional skills we're going to need? How we're going to build inner resilience? Charles Eisenstein, I think, calls it inner sustainability. There's this whole move, the kind of Joanna Macy move, towards thinking about, we won't be able to do this work in the world unless we do this work with ourselves, and vice versa. And that particular marrying of the inner and the outer, the political and the personal, the spiritual and the sort of political, is not often leaves justice in the dust, right? It somehow, sometimes the climate emotions world has kind of been privileged or elite or a little bit inaccessible. When we talk about mental health too, mental health resources tend to be, or therapy, sort of pathologizing climate emotions, tends to be people individually in therapy offices who have the resources to deal with that. And so the people who have been doing the most research on this, for the most part, have been really focused on a very narrow, fairly privileged group of people, and who are sort of thinking about climate as an abstract anxiety on this amorphous timeline of the future. And that's been a very sticky wicket. And the move of thinking about climate emotions to integrate questions of justice, identity, how identity would shape emotional responses to different perceived risks, all of these things has been very slow to catch up in the climate emotions world. And yet you all are in Good Grief Network and in this book, taking that as a baseline assumption that these things have to go together, and you're forging forward like, trendsetters on this front, trying to make sure that those things get integrated. And throughout the book, over and over, none of these things can happen unless people awaken to the ways that power plays into all of this. The reckoning around one's own both privilege and a lack of access to power, which happen all the time. That's the theory of intersectionality. We're all kind of living in different manifestations of that. The complexity of how that inner work that goes along with racial reckoning, ableism reckoning, colonial reckoning, all of these kinds of forms of privilege and power that people inherit are shaping or are inflecting all of these different climate emotions that you're then trying to tackle in Good Grief Network. And you just deal with it all. You just deal with it all. You confront all that head on. And I think that's unique and wonderful and important. So I know you do it in your actual workshops too. So I mean, as described in the steps, right? So I don't know if you want to sort of take it from here and say, since there's no other models for how to do that, and since the vast majority of the work that's happening in climate emotion space is fairly focused on a very privileged group, how are you figuring out how to bring that in? What are your models to do that? I myself don't even have an answer to that. I find it quite difficult. So I'm very curious how you figured it out.
Yeah, figuring it out.
Okay, how are you figuring it out in the current?
I think what's coming to mind just immediately is that it is a process. It's a process of undoing and unlearning and figuring out, because I think for a while we were perpetuating the sort of single narrative and what healing looks like, and we're trying to expand that by putting ourselves in positions to learn more and to understand more about how they're interconnected. I know, we've done trainings and we've gotten certificates and things like that, but I think when it comes down to it, if you just ask enough questions, you see, like, what do we usually say? Something like the same systems that allow us to devour ecosystems are the same systems that are like basically casting whole populations of people as other and saying we should be fighting them. Like, it's the same systems and these power dynamics that are in place. And so we like to say that if you focus only on greenhouse gas emissions, that you're only like slicing off a branch of the tree, and you're not actually getting to the root of the issues. Like, even if we stopped all carbon emissions, now we have tremendous social justice issues. So that's just what comes to mind real quick.
And what comes to mind for me is I actually first learned about environmental justice as a freshman in college. I was part of a group called the World Peace Initiative, and we showed these series of films that we'd gotten permission, like, it was really radical films that were just letting university students, organizations screen them for free. And so we brought several videos on the topic. And so it was there that I learned about how any kind of factory that's going to pollute is often put in the low income side of town because their voices don't matter as much, and
they can't fight legally, right? They don't have the means to fight. And
yes, and so it from the get-go was connected for me, and especially the injustices I've witnessed as a human rights activist in regards to racial injustice and how that connects to climate and where big polluters are going and who has access to fresh water, who like all of that is interconnected. And the more I learned about it, the more I couldn't let it go. And so I didn't feel comfortable in the environmental spaces when I first started following LaUra to them. I was like, this is a lot of white people. Like, you know, my family members of color have told me, like, be suspicious of all white spaces. And when I was following her to these environmental protests and things, like, that was all I was seeing. And so it was learning about the interconnectedness of the issues that really made this feel deeply personal, and a reminder that, like, we're all living. I liked how you phrased that, Sarah. I'm not going to do it justice, but the idea of, like, we're living our in some place between privilege and not having a voice, and that we're all floating around in these different places, and at the end of the day, we're all suffering.
One of the things that you also do, in addition to being accountable to a justice lens throughout every chapter, right? So I want to even push it further to say, not only are you thinking about it, not only do you see the connections, but in each of the steps, you have interrogated and run each of the steps kind of through an intersectionality filter to make sure that power is addressed in thinking through this. Who is this going to feel inaccessible to? Who is this going to attract? Is there some implicit bias in the ways that we're constructing this, and how? And I'm sure you do that in the how of the facilitation too. So that's kind of putting a finer point on what I see. But in addition, you draw on and integrate perspectives from many, many different wisdom traditions, many different cultures, many different epistemologies, that in such a generous, non-appropriative way throughout the book. And I think that the fact that you knew how to do that and paid attention to that, acknowledged the sort of limitations of what that means, the sort of coding of you being two white presenting authors. And so that whole identity politics of how you're using multiple voices in the book is an example of how that can happen. So at some point you say something like, these ideas are all over the world and ancient. And can we maybe think about how they might help us now, how they might serve us now, and how we can make sure we acknowledge whose knowledges these are. So that's also a beautiful thing that you do in the book too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we do call on people to assess their own spiritual traditions and see, like, what helped them survive, what helped their ancestors survive, like what are resilient strategies that have been enacted for a long time, because they're different and they exist, and this culture makes us think that we've forgotten them. But I feel like that's really embodied knowledge, and if we can start stripping away all of our cultural conditioning, we can tap into those, like, resilient strategies that we inherently know about and we know how to do. It just, there's so many obstacles to enacting them and practicing them. We got to go to work, we got to answer emails, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, and then we're tired, you know, we're like stuck in this sort of rat race, hamster wheel. Soul crushing.
I think if I had tried to do what you all are doing and condense it into a book, I know I would have given up, and I would have had to have Rebecca and Chelsie and everybody else, you know, dragging me along too. So just deep honor for that collaboration, that collective. I mean, listening to you talk about each other is so deeply moving, and it speaks to the necessity we have for like-minded heart, mind, earth lovers to do this together. So I'm very moved by that.
Thank you. Thank you. It is our great hope that this becomes a piece to collaborate on and to bring into conversation circles and to help people feel less alone. And so right from the beginning, in fact, maybe I'll read it at some point, but right from the beginning, we just say we're mashup artists. We're like collators. We put a bunch of things together and just kind of like push them through our personal experiences. But one thing is true, is that we need each other, and we need to figure out how to do this, and we need to have an understanding of imperfection while we're doing it. In our flow facilitation training, we said time and time again that we can't wait until we're like completely de-supremacied of all of our biases and supremacies until we engage in this. And that's where the repair work happens. That's where we need to be accountable for the harm that we cause, because we can't wait until all this conditioning is gone until we're doing the work. We need to like build the bridge as we're going, I think.
I really needed that reminder today, and that's you hit on the exact point that I was suggesting. That takes such vulnerability and courage to step out there and do all this work that's interactive, that's deeply emotional, that triggers everybody's traumas, personal and political, and how much of that exposure comes back on you both as an emotional drain, as a critique of you, as whatever challenges and bumps along the road that I would find almost, so difficult that I wouldn't be able to do it. And so just, again, profound. I mean, writing the book is, you can do that. You could do this in the privacy of your own room and no one would ever yell at you. But you're out there doing Good Grief Network interaction with people all the time. It's deeply messy. I'm thinking here of the book by Alexis Shotwell called Against Purity. And she's beautifully interviewed, I believe, on For the Wild, a beautiful podcast interview with her, where she talks about the messiness and the impurity that comes with doing racial justice work, and an invitation for people to not wait around, as you just said, to be pure and perfect to get to doing it. But it does involve messiness. So I am just profoundly in awe of that.
Thank you. Thank you. It applies a lot to our work as activists in the climate space as well. And we address that. Actually, Aimee's going to read just a piece about it that touches on it. But we also get somehow we think we have to be the perfect activist before we can critique the systems that inherently are destroying everything. And that gets into gaslighting and all the social political things that sort of keep us in this hamster wheel. But we have this idea that we have to be perfect before we can show up, and not that we can embrace this authenticity and this vulnerability along the way, which is actually what we need to do, and what many of us have forgotten how to do. I come from a lot of trauma, and so I did not know I'm still learning how to relate to people and how to keep your guard down and how to do a lot of those things that I think are inspiration and lead to courage for the pathway forward. I think the illusion of perfection is really a big obstacle and a roadblock that many of us are facing in any type of change work.
That reminds me, one of our steps, we teach about brain science, and we call it the permission to be wrong step, because once you start learning about brain science and all the ways our brains take shortcuts, they're designed to mess up. They're not designed for our modern world today. And so we all have permission to mess up and to be imperfect, and you'd be surprised how liberated that makes people feel. You would think it's common sense. We all know we're going to be wrong sometimes, but it's does our heart know that we're going to be wrong sometimes? Are we ready for that? And that's where it's one of my favorite steps. We come together and just learn about our brains and think wow, how did I ever get the idea that I was supposed to be right all the time? What a ridiculous, absurd thing.
Well, some of us are right all the time. I'm just kidding.
It's not me in this relationship.
Oh,
That note, can I ask a question of you two? I'm sure this answer changes based on the day, but if you have a favorite step today or in general in the program that you can share.
Could you ask your question one more time? I'm sorry.
That's okay. If you have a favorite step, and I'm sure this changes from day to day, but maybe just today, what your favorite step is, or one that you're maybe wrestling with.
Let's see, you're asking us to choose our favorite child.
And it does vary day to day. Because I'm sitting here thinking well, sometimes it's that one, so it really depends where I'm at and which step I need the most. And so
She's looking at the steps
I
on the
have
back of the book.
Yeah, I have the
What were those steps again? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
You can never be sure. Step 4, doing your work, is a really big one. And I think because it's so opposite of what so many activists have been trained to think, is oh, how I feel on the inside matters. We're not just doing all these external things. And so that's one of my favorites. Yeah, I was gonna name like 3 or 4 more, but clearly that's like half the steps. So I'm gonna go with 4, do inner work, but don't hold me to it.
I'm a big fan of the first one. And this is some of the criticism that we've received is we start out with accept the severity of the predicament. It's a really hard step to come into a program on. And for example, Joanna Macy's program starts from gratitude, and there's so much wisdom in starting from a place of gratitude. And we do address gratitude as part of our program, but we feel like we have to start with the acknowledgement that something is terribly wrong with the way that we're operating in the dominant culture. And until we can come to that consensus, it's really hard to move on to something else. And a strength of our program is that we don't sit and argue about how bad we think things are. We don't talk about the facts a lot. There's like a little bug flying.
I see it. I see it.
I did shower today. So. But yeah, that like we don't sit and argue about how bad we think things are. We just know things are bad, and we hold space for the emotional understanding of like the fear and the grief and all of the things that come along with our perception of how bad things are. And then I will choose to, may I?
Yeah, do it.
And then the second one is honor my mortality and the mortality of all.
Yeah.
And this step used to be confront my mortality. And then our friend and colleague, Michael Dowd, was like, that seems kind of adversarial. Like, do you really want to confront your mortality? And then we had to sit with it for a little while, because that's not at all what we want to do with the step. We want to honor mortality as being part of the life cycle. And of course, the amount of death that's happening is very unnatural. And so this immediately puts us into a paradox of honoring something that's natural and absolutely not honoring the amount of death and the amount of destruction and the amount of injustices that are happening all around us. But part of the problem that we have with the dominant culture is that we are absolutely unable to sit with death. We like try to deny our death in every way possible. And then this leads to what Ernest Becker calls death anxiety. And we could talk about this at length, but maybe I'll pause. Oh, they're right in the steps. Yeah. That's so great.
Oh, awesome.
I can maybe post the steps as well. Former step 2. Yes, Blair. Yes.
Yes.
All right. So, it's fun to read the comments, and I just need a minute. We have a lot of good grievers here and a lot of facilitators, and so this is a very rich conversation here.
Well, I'll add that my favorite one that I feel I lean on a lot is, and now I'm going to forget exactly how it's phrased, but just finding beauty and joy and appreciating, especially the natural world. That really, I often have to remember that you really cannot fix every problem or, drive yourself nuts trying to recycle every single thing in the right place, or never ever use a straw, or it's very overwhelming. Or just when you hear, horrible things in the news about the climate, it often is very grounding and relieving to see that there's still so much beauty in the natural world, even though there is a lot of destruction as well. There's so much to appreciate. So yeah, that's my favorite.
Chelsie.
Thank you for that, Chelsie.
It is practice gratitude, witness beauty, and create connections.
Thank
right?
you.
Is that the one you're pointing to?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. Both Kasha and Sarah put it in the chat for us. I absolutely love this conversation that's happening over in the chat. Folks are telling us what their step is for today. I wanted to try to put a picture, an image file. I'm getting there.
I just did it.
Thank you, Sarah. Other Sarah.
Sarah
Yes.
Okay, well, this is great. So we would like to read from the book just a little bit. So before we do that, I'm wondering if Sarah or Chelsie have any lingering things, anything bubbling up before we start reading a couple excerpts.
It's all you.
Well, thank you both
Okay.
so much for joining us in this conversation. And will we chat more? Because we're going to have an intermission at the hour mark,
Yeah, I think so.
and then
think
we'll
so.
probably chat some more.
We have a couple poems.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll, and I want to leave some space for Q&A. so
Oh,
if
yeah, me
questions
too.
come through.
Me too.
All right, we are gonna unspotlight you folks, and do you want to start reading or do you want me to start reading? Do you want me
I
to?
forgot whose comes first.
Well, I'll do step 3.
So you.
Okay, all right. I am gonna remove your spotlight. Thank you again, folks, for showing up for us and talking about this.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you for actually, what I want to do is show Sarah's book before we unspotlight Sarah.
Also an amazing book.
This book is amazing. It really absolutely is. I have highlights all over it. We have a podcast episode that covers it, and it was just an absolute joy to talk about Sarah's book. So it's really nice that Sarah could come and talk about our book. And then Sarah has a couple events that are coming up, and I want to plug those for you folks, because we really believe in the inner work and mindfulness, and want to make sure that if you're interested in that, that you come and learn Sarah's ways of being.
And I just wanted to share that when we did that podcast with you a few years ago, it was my first time meeting you. I'm not sure if it was your first time meeting.
I think we've been in some spaces,
But
maybe.
the hardest part about that episode was like narrowing it down, because we ended up hanging out on Zoom for like 3 hours just chatting and like being so excited about the topics we were talking about.
Yes.
And so that was
It was so fun to come back and do this 3 years later for your book. So this is just so delightful. Yay, I'm celebrating. And thank you for the plug for the mindfulness stuff. You're so sweet.
Definitely. And Chelsie, we'll come back to you, I think.
Yeah.
We'll try to have some more conversations, but for the moment, thank you so much for believing in us and for having enough, I'm looking for a word here, patience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to choose too.
To see this project through to completion. Thank you, Chelsie.
Yes.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'll let you take it away.
All
All
right.
right. I have to figure out how to remove the spotlight.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
There we go.
So we'll do a couple readings, and then we will take a little break, and then we'll come back. So I'm going to start with our chapter 3, which is Honor My Mortality and the Mortality of All. And we start this chapter with a quote from Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone that says, "Should you fear that with this pain your heart might break, remember that the heart that breaks open can hold the whole universe. Your heart is that large. Trust it. Keep breathing." And I say, I live in a world full of ghosts. They linger among single-use plastics, gasoline-powered vehicles, coal trains that catch me at the railroad tracks on my way to the box store, and television commercials. These ghosts find themselves in fast fashion, concentrated animal feeding operations, and our monocultures. All things sustained by fossil fuels must be rearranged, re-envisioned, and most of them left behind in this paradigm. We're going to lose a lot of what many of us in the dominant culture take for granted. This truth is present with me every day, and I struggle with the tension of participating in this destructive culture. The awareness haunts me, and until I created Good Grief Network, it was suffocating me. The dominant paradigm's time has come. The illusion provided by fossil fuels that we can maintain infinite growth on a finite planet is shattering. Yet we're addicted to this way of living. It's hard for us to imagine anything but what we have now, and many of us do not want to. Human psychology makes us believe that tomorrow will be like today, even when we're presented with information to the contrary. We believe someone will save us. The problem will not affect us directly, or that it simply cannot be happening. But when all these biases crack open and the severity of the predicament forces its way through, the reminders can flood our bodies with complex emotions as the dominant culture continues business as usual, eliminating any opportunity to restore a habitable planet. The dominant paradigm is unsustainable in the truest sense. We live on a planet with finite resources, some of them renewable and many not. Non-renewable resources like oil, coal, and natural gas cannot be replaced after they're used up. Water, air, and forests are thought to be examples of renewable resources that replenish over a short amount of time. Because the global economy is largely based on extraction and consumerism, we have mechanized the gobbling up and spitting out a significant portion of Earth's resources. For example, by late July of each year, humanity uses up our global allotment of resources for that entire year, throwing us into overshoot. Simply put, humanity's demand for resources is using them faster than the ecological capacity to regenerate said resources. To add a significant layer of complexity, Earth Overshoot Day varies from country to country depending on the level of consumption. There are even some countries that don't have an overshoot day. Those in the dominant paradigm devour our share of resources allotted for a given year, stealing a half a year from our collective future. And we do this every year. We can only live this way for so long before the bottom falls out. The death of our current way of life, our lifestyles, worldviews, fossil fuel powered conveniences can be overwhelming. And because of that, we need spaces to be in this knowing together, to weep, to mourn, to rage with other people who also feel this truth in their bones. We must learn to hold the tension of so much loss and our complicity in those losses together. We hold no promises of an unrealistic future, and we refuse to submit in resignation. We create spaces to honor this time of transition as we work on those seeds that might grow into life-centered paradigms. Fellow Good Griever Katie Gould shares about her time in Good Grief Network spaces. We weren't trying to put on good faces or reassure each other that things would be okay. None of us believed that it would be okay. It was incredibly refreshing to exist in our worst case scenarios and darkest fears together. I left feeling a much stronger sense of how common these thoughts are and the realization that most people are just hoping for some sort of opening to talk about it. The hours spent discussing these really emotional issues made me more comfortable talking about the climate crisis like any other topic, a practice I want to continue to grow.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Earth Overshoot Day was just the other day. So technically for the rest of the year, we are borrowing from our future just by using the resources that we have here. That day was just 3 days ago, 2 days ago, 4 days ago. Time. Whew. You want to take us even deeper and go to step 8?
Yeah.
Or should we like break it up with a poem? What do you think?
Let's break it up with a poem because I think both of our sections are kind of heavy.
That's what we do.
That is what we do.
Okay. Will you read Brooke McNamara's poem?
I will.
Do you want to read it from the book?
Yeah, I do. I was going to read it from my phone, but it'll be way better to read from here. Is Brooke here tonight?
I don't believe so.
Well, she's an amazing poet. So if you do not know Brooke McNamara, I encourage you to follow her on social media.
And I'll put her book link in the chat.
Perfect. All right, so this poem is called Funeral for a Future by Brooke McNamara. I held a funeral for a future I had always thought was coming and buried the world's face as yet. The silence then turned me so tiny. The only way forward was to dream downward to an early day on earth before a single heartbeat, the atmosphere filled with an abiding cataclysmic knowing that if everything could be born, everything could be born. Love promises no less, but a future is gone now. All we are is this. Our way could be to fall toward the medicine seated right inside the untamable, fertile grief, remaking things. And Brooke McNamara is a Zen teacher, lineage holder, and poet. That's not part of her bio, so we're gonna stop there.
I tried to look up her poetry book and my internet didn't work, even though we're using the same internet for the call.
I'm hogging it all.
Yeah. I just wanted to re-highlight this idea that grief actually is generative, and that if everything could be born, everything could be born, and that a certain future is gone, and yet there's some medicine to be found in these times. And I think that this poem really prefaces what we're trying to do with our book, is like a way of being isn't available to us anymore. And yet that doesn't mean no other ways of being aren't available. It's Sarah's question from earlier tonight about what else is true, the focus on what else is true. Do you want to go ahead and read and then we'll take a break?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It'll take us to intermission.
Her site is down. Thanks, Sarah.
Oh,
It
good to
wasn't
know.
us.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, I think she's on Bookshop. I'll find her when you're reading.
All right. This is a little bit of a longer section, but it just felt incomplete to cut it any place sooner. So we'll just dive in. Step 8. And this, I will say, is one of the hardest steps. We get a lot of pushback for this step. Step 8, grieve the harm I have caused. And it starts with a quote from Toni Morrison that says, "Don't let anybody convince you this is the way the world is and therefore must be. It must be the way it ought to be." We are all harm doers. We are messy human beings navigating the world under a paradigm created out of oppression and exploitation and maintained through violence. As individuals, we are blamed for the decisions of big corporations and a corrupt political order, as if our individual footprint can overturn the destructive behemoth that has been set in motion. In a recent hospital visit, the staff wouldn't let me use a reusable water bottle. Instead, the hospital administered bottle after bottle of Nestle water, and by day 2, I had already used about 10 bottles. In my mind, I could hear Laura's voice on repeat telling me all about how plastic recycling is a sham and plastic water bottles leach toxins into the water. Plastic pervades every aspect of our lives. We destroy ecosystems to dig fossil fuels from below the Earth's surface and transform them into single-use plastics, only to ship them away to sit in landfills for hundreds of years or release them into our waterways, poisoning our aquatic cousins and drinking water. Plastic is in every ecosystem on Earth, in the food we eat, in the giant patches in the oceans, and even in the deepest tissues of our bodies. Plastic has weaseled its way down to our geologic record. Then I thought of the toxic water situation in Flint, Michigan, a city about 100 miles away from my hometown. For more than 5 years, drinking water from plastic bottles has been safer than drinking from their taps. Worldwide, nearly 2 billion people are without access to clean drinking water right now. In these situations, bottled water saves lives. My thoughts flip to plastic silverware, styrofoam, diapers, maxi pads, straws, and all the useless packaging that haunts me. Sitting in the hospital, crinkling my plastic water bottle between my hands, I sat with the complexity of the situation. For many, plastics are conveniences that come at the expense of energy, ecosystems, and health. For others, they are a lifeline. I felt powerless by this level of complexity. Should I not drink bottled water? Should I not use any plastic? What was the right thing to do? Was there a right thing to do? In a paradigm full of impossible choices, no one can do the right thing all the time. We must constantly weigh our options, factoring in our needs, the available conveniences, our values, and the level of harm each option creates. This can make us feel shame, guilt, grief, frustration, or other heavy feelings. The dance of impossible choices is exhausting, and when we see others acting in ways that we don't agree with, such as using more water than us, flying, consuming meat or dairy, we might have the urge to judge them. This is where showing ourselves compassion and once again extending that compassion outward toward each other is necessary. Judging others for their actions while living in a broken system is a form of moral superiority that only serves to further divide and isolate us. This is what our power over systems do: blame us as individuals for toxic systems. Cultural messaging tells us that it is up to each of us to measure our carbon footprints, conserve water, use canvas shopping bags, decline plastic straws, and move toward a zero waste lifestyle, and that until we have reached perfection, we have no right to critique systems. That notion is convenient for corporations that are gobbling up our planet, our resources, and our souls. We are all allowed to question destructive systems, and as we are able, withdraw our participation in them and hold them accountable for their grievous wrongdoings. Let us also stop policing the actions of everyone around us. Each of us has permission to be an imperfect change maker. Not only that, we must embrace our imperfections as change makers. We are all doing harm to our planet and sometimes to each other and ourselves if we live in a paradigm that profits from harm and exploitation. Maybe we consume factory farmed meat or dairy. Perhaps we drive a gasoline-powered car or fly on airplanes. It's likely that a number of us participate in fast fashion, buying clothes made in faraway sweatshops. The level of harm we participate in varies considerably from person to person and community to community. Unpacking our complicity is an endless task, and we must start reckoning with our levels of harm so that we can move closer to our values and undo these toxic systems that exist in the shadows of our shame. Our inability to be compassionately accountable to ourselves with regard to our participation in these systems helps keep the dominant culture afloat. Sometimes we make mistakes, play out norms that we are socialized into, act out of ignorance, or otherwise act out and do harm that we could have avoided. We all make choices that are out of alignment with our values on occasion, and so many of us benefit from the complex system of privilege, power, convenience, and profit. We live in a world full of impossible choices where we cause harm just by existing in this time and place. When this happens, we are invited to slow down, take a pause, and feel the grief that results from the harm we have caused. This process opens us to remorse, where we can identify ways to minimize harm in the future. Take it from good griever Allie Hubbardson, who hosted our very first STEP program in Salt Lake City, Utah. She said, "I felt literally lighter after acknowledging my complicity in these problems because it was such a relief to finally admit to myself and have others witness how much guilt and shame I felt to be in lockstep with a capitalist system that relentlessly extracts from and monetizes my life and the lives of basically everything I hold dear. I had never given voice to that shame of having so much plenty, privilege, and convenience at the expense of the living world and those who are oppressed. Looking back on this now, I realize this was ground zero in the process of decolonizing my mind to be able to accurately see the innate destructiveness of our collective Western worldview. This step in our program is about acknowledging the harm we have done to ourselves, other beings, and our planet, and creating space to grieve that damage. It is about examining the systemic power dynamics and our complex roles as harm doers, showing ourselves and others compassion for our mistakes, and looking for openings to live in alignment with our values and minimize further harm caused by our decisions and actions. This step is also about creating room for remorse, repair, and healing so that we have a chance of doing things differently."
Thank you, Aimee. Oof, that's a lot to take in. We're going to take a 5-minute break so that you can sit with it, but Aimee has a special treat planned for you
to lift us up from the heaviness, because we believe there's beauty in the heaviness, but don't forget we're here to celebrate. I have chosen the perfect song that is exactly 5 minutes. So we're going to take a 5-minute intermission, fill your drinks, bio break, whatever you need. We'll see you back in 5 minutes. And in the meantime, rock steady.
Welcome back. Welcome back, Liz. We loved the dancing.
We loved the dancing. Thank you for that. We were dancing too with our camera off.
That was Aimee's song choice.
I thought it'd be just perfect for the occasion, and it was. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
We will do some more dancing or intuitive movement as we wrap up, but I want to go right into playing a poem. This is a poem by one of our facilitators, Kristen Childs, and she is not here today, but she recorded it. And so I am going to try to play it with the backdrop of a YouTube clip. So this is like master's degree level tech that I am about to embark on. So
Can you do it?
maybe. Actually, I don't think I can. Maybe we'll just listen to the poem. We're gonna listen to the poem, and I'll stare at each other in each other's eyes. So
Yeah,
actually,
can we put it on gallery view so we
Yeah.
can see everybody?
I
while
think
we're
this
listening?
is our challenge to you, since I can't play a beautiful song or thing in the background, that we all put it into gallery view and we look at each other and
Oh,
we listen to the words of our facilitator, Kristen Childs, who wrote a poem that is included in this book. It's still going to take me a second to share it.
it's so nice to see so many familiar faces and new folks too.
Okay. Advanced. Computer audio. We're getting there, folks.
Hi, everybody. It's Kristen. I'm so sorry I'm not able to be there with you, but I'm honored to read a poem that I wrote. It's a poem about my experience with the Good Grief Network. Bedrock. Did you want anything more than a clear blue future for your children? Did you eat a steady diet of stories that told you it would all end okay? Did you believe in Paris? Did you get solar panels and backyard chickens and take your kids camping and sing before dinner about how you love the earth and will care for her always? Did you believe that if you did it all right, then it would all be all right? I did. And what happened when your faith began to crack? What happened when you held a child on your lap and quietly read the headlines? The science of methane and bleaching and feedback loops. Do you remember nursing when you read about tipping points, afraid your baby might drink your fear? How do we midwife such hopeful beings into a world that is collapsing just as they step into it? Why do we teach them to trust us? The end of nature sat on my nightstand, but I covered it with a baby blanket. I thought I should write letters and march and sign petitions, but I preferred to help little hands learn to stack blocks. My husband raged about it all. He was chipping at my armor, and I resented him for it. I thought it was his fault their childhoods were getting spoiled. I swung through conversations and through seasons, hopeful, hopeless, hopeful, hopeless, exhausted as a seabird trying to land. My faith was thinning, but still I held it up like fabric for the children to see. I wonder now if this was an act of love or of betrayal. The most brutal moments were the simple questions. Mommy, why is the sun so red today? Why do we have to put our favorite things in a bag? Will the fire burn up our house? Can I bring all of this? Why does it hurt to breathe? Is everything going to be okay, Mama? My voice too high. Everything's going to be fine, honey. Who was I trying to convince, them or myself? I was desperate to push down the rising panic, but it always came back at night. The better my children slept, the worse I did. They had no idea. One day, my daughter learned of the mass extinctions. All of them? Forever? Mama, really? She still put together an outfit of purple and blue and wondered who would sit next to her at lunch. I saw in her the divide that severed me. I began to break. Later, my son read the entire IPCC report in his bedroom. He came out and said nothing. He didn't even look at me. I broke. I was frozen. I didn't know how to be me anymore. I didn't know how to parent. I couldn't pretend, but how could I be honest? I found good grief. The name called to me like a lost relative. Meeting one, our first moments together, we all shared why we had come. We were scared, alone, anxious, depressed, detached, angry, sad. We each emerged from a cave of isolation, stepped into the sun of understanding. We were crying. We were melting, becoming soft again. I saw the sadness under my husband's rage, and I loved him for it. He felt the fabric of me torn in half, and he held the pieces in his quiet hands. We took off our masks. We all had stories. The doomers and the activists didn't agree, and it didn't matter. We didn't even talk about the facts. Why would we? We didn't try to fix each other. We just listened hard as we ever had. Our oldest armor dissolved in the warmth of each other's attention. Even a joy came, which surprised us. How could this feel good? Like holding hands in the dark, I suppose. We learned to need each other the way people used to. We dug for truth, and here is what we discovered. Under the sedimentary layers of rage, of despair, of a glacial numbness, we found a bedrock of grief. What a strange comfort. At least grief is sturdy. At least grief is real. We can stand on this together. We kept digging. Under the grief, we found something deeper. A hot, molten love for this world. This is what life is made of. It can burn anything in its path. We aren't crazy. This love is primordial. No wonder the losses hurt so much. And now, we return to our lives, secure on that bedrock of grief, sensing always the fluid pulse underneath. They are the same, really, aren't they? Hot and cold rock, grief a form of love. And when the fires come again, as they will, I will kneel down and lock eyes with any child, yours or mine. I know it's scary, honey. I'm scared too. Here, take my hand. The impossibilities that used to rip us, the unanswerable questions of our time, now we can hold them in our widened arms. We have grown our capacity. We have become immense, as Weller asked. We contain Whitman's multitudes. Perhaps we are becoming elders, and that is what the world needs now more than anything. And hope is no longer something we measure with inadequate tools. It's a way of being. It looks like this. We plant fruit trees near the sidewalk. We love teenagers. We sing the old movement songs. We notice the sky. We know our neighbors. We tell the truth. We dance. We rewild any corner of the world still possible, hoping to rewild ourselves in the process. And of course, we grieve. You don't leave the bedside of your mother, your lover, or your child. The earth is all of these. We will be the ones with the courage to cry. We will not pretend or turn away. We will save every scrap of life that we can. And we will honor each loss in the best way we know how, with our attention to it. It is sacred work, learning to say goodbye. Whatever the unknowable future holds, we now have glimpsed how we will face it. Connected, reliant, doing the gritty work of reimagining, sending roots into the rock.
What a gift from Kristen Childs.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to that with us. We have a bit of time left. Wondering if there's a question or two. I'm sure there's many. And then we will go on and dance to 2 songs.
We picked 2 songs to dance to. I hope you can stick around for that part, because that's always my favorite, is dancing on Zoom with all the different boxes dancing. It's so fun.
And it goes back to the both and. We can feel joy and we can feel the loss. Kristen did bring us down a level, but also with so much beauty.
Yeah.
Her last words were something along the lines of attention, like our gift is our attention right now. All right, I see some chats coming. Is there any way to have a copy of that poem? Yes, there is. You can buy our book. Yep, Sarah said in the book, thank you for sharing that poem. Profound. It was so moving. And what's really nice is we have a lot of stories from good grievers throughout the book. And so Kristen did hers in poetry form, but we have little excerpts from many of the people who are actually in this space right now. So you'll get to hear a little bit about how good grief impacted them. Yes, hearing her speak is something else. Yes, we specifically asked her to record it if she couldn't be here, because I hadn't heard it in her voice. I'd only read it, and I realized I was being brought to tears just by reading it and hearing it in my own voice, and I needed to hear it in Kristen's. And I like too that she left the imperfection in there. She didn't re-record it. She just like left it, and I was like, "This is good grief. This is what we do.
That's authentic."
All right. Any questions?
I have a question. I've got a question for everyone. How much love is everyone feeling right now? Because,
So much love.
how much love are you?
Medium amount of love. Say healthy amounts of love.
And by that she means surplus love, more than we could have imagined.
Yeah. I feel really grateful. There's a lot of people on this call who have really held us up and who have helped us get to this point. Some of them are good grievers. Some of them are old friends from high school. Some of them are beloved friends that we've made.
Cousins.
Since then. Family. Yeah, absolutely.
Grandma, my mom and dad. Hi, everybody.
Oof.
I think Chelsea's mom was here.
She was, yeah. She had to go with the intermission, but she did want me to let you know how much she really enjoyed Rocksteady. So
yes, thank you for that.
Aimee was like, "You just got to trust me on this, LaUra. You just trust me. I'm doing this song." Okay. Okay. Speaking of that, for those of you still here, Aimee created a book playlist.
I know we should have shared it earlier, because
we have all their emails. It's okay.
Oh yeah, that's okay.
Opportunity
It's not
is
too
not
late.
lost.
But yeah, I spent months and months, and even up until today was just tweaking a couple songs here and there. It was so hard to pick 3 songs for each step. There were many steps where I had like 4 or 5 songs that I wanted, but just to keep it consistent and easy and flowing, there are 3 songs per chapter. So that even includes like the community chapter at the start of the book, goes through the 10 steps and ends on step 10. So I hope you enjoy it. It has a ton of variety. If you don't like one song, I hope you should be able to find another one that you do like. So give it a listen for sure.
Whew. All right. Maybe I'll do one more reading and then we'll move our bodies to the 2 songs.
Yeah.
How's that feel? You want one more reading?
Are there more questions? Any questions?
I'd kind of be interested to hear if there's more responses or questions. I think there was only one person we've heard.
There's a question in the chat about your writing process. Hold on. Do you see it?
I see it. What did you do to take a break away from writing during this process? You know, we took a lot of breaks together, which was really fun. We often, this was during probably the height of the pandemic. So we would have a lot of happy hours together on Zoom on top of actually writing. So trying to make sure we were doing some fun stuff on the side as well was key.
Yes, those happy hours really saw me through that period of such isolation. And we would work for 2 hours first. We like still did the work, and then we would celebrate at the end of 2 hours and bust out the drinks. And Victor, Chelsea's partner, or husband now, would come.
Still partner.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Victor would join us, and Victor also is the mastermind behind our logo. So shout out to Victor.
The writing process, though, we started with meetings once a week for 2 or 3 hours, just kind of like, we'd be like, we're going to talk about step 1 right now. And then we would just tell Chelsie everything we could think about that should be in step 1. And
sometimes while crying for the whole call. And she would just be like, I can find a story in this. Okay. She was not off.
Right.
And then, yeah, step 2, step 3, and all the way through. And then what Chelsie ended up doing was kind of taking a big pic. Actually, Chelsie, do you want me to speak, or do you want to?
No, you go ahead. It was a very collaborative process. So.
Well, Chelsie created the backbone, which I said earlier, but what Chelsie would do is kind of listen to the arc and listen to the story, and was like, I think we should weave it this way. And so then she would give us an outline of the chapter, which are also the steps. So each of the chapters are the steps, and we would go through and fill it in with what she had like gathered from our stories together. And that was pretty much how we wrote it. The last like few chapters were kind of like, just try to get it done, because when a project becomes that big, it feels like a little unruly and unmanageable. And then we had a lot of like editorial changes and a lot of like things on the publisher's end that delayed it quite significantly. And I was really discouraged, but I think it ended up being a gift in a weird way. And so I'm very happy with the release date of August 8th, which is our friend and colleague Carolyn Baker's birthday.
Yeah. Shout out to Carolyn Baker.
Although it was supposed to be released on May 2nd, which is Joanna Macy's birthday, Mirabai Star's birthday, and your Uncle Mike's birthday.
And Uncle Mike's, yes, Uncle Mike's birthday. He may or may not be on the call. I didn't get to see.
But yeah, anything y'all want to add about the writing process?
Well, I wanted to say another shout out to Carolyn Baker, because she was our first book review, like formal book review. And we were feeling so vulnerable and like burned up and scarred by this process, that to have a formal book review that was just as glowing as hers was a gift beyond words. And she'd been supporting us long before the book review, but that book review really shifted something in us, where we're like starting to get excited about it coming out and the thought of people reading it.
Yeah. Blair Nelson of Water Spirit, Prophet Water Spirit in New Jersey, also left us book review. And so grateful for that.
Oh yeah, and that was glowing too. Oh, I love Blair. Is Blair on the call?
Blair was on the call.
I thought I saw her name.
He's here.
Thank you, Blair, for your book review.
Blair runs our 10-step program through her nonprofit out in New Jersey, and has done Blair. Can we highlight Blair for a second?
Can we highlight Blair?
Where are you?
On to 10. We just connected about that this weekend. They've run 10-step groups.
And that's so exciting.
I'm spotlighting Blair.
Let's see Blair for a minute.
Hi, Blair.
Hi, Blair.
So good to see you.
I'm lovely to see you too. And congratulations, everyone, on this book. I meant everything that I wrote in the review. I think it's a stunning work that stands on its own. As someone who's got a certain degree of familiarity with the resources in the 10 Steps resource pack by this point, yeah, I still got a lot out of engaging with this book again. So much so that we're going to give a copy to everyone who goes through our fall group with Water Spirit. So I'm really
Thank you, Blair.
That's a joy to
share and love. I think it's going to help people keep the conversation going after groups have concluded.
Yeah, thank you. You cut out a little bit, but I think we got most of it. Maybe we cut out. Someone cut out. Thank you, Blair.
Thank you so much, Blair.
All right. let's see, Kasha.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, you've got your like biggest fan club here. So how can we help promote this incredible book? Like, what's the best way to get the word out?
That is a great question. Give it to friends or recommend it to friends. So much of what Good Grief Network has achieved has been word of mouth. And it really is a grassroots movement. And so if you even tell 3 friends about it, that would be a gift. And of course, like the more friends, the better. I know some people have said they checked at their libraries to make sure the library can have a copy. Book reviews,
yes.
Like on Amazon and wherever else you can write reviews for books. Goodreads, yeah, Goodreads does that.
Farah also suggested that we all post about it on social media, on our
Oh,
social
that'd
media.
be fun. We should like have a hashtag.
What I would love is for each of you who read the book to take a picture and to tag, if you're on Instagram, how to live in a chaotic climate. And then we can that's exactly what we're looking for. But I would just love it. And I've tried to get clever with some of the places that have been putting the books. I like put it in lots of cool places anyway. But that
meaning she like holds it up next to the river and then takes a picture, or
a tree,
like today there was little graffiti ducks on the sidewalk and we put it next to one of the graffiti ducks and took a picture. And so yeah, just any place you can find to take a picture of it.
Thank you, Kasha.
What's our hashtag for social media? Folks want to know.
Victor.
Yeah.
I speak on his behalf. I do like hashtag chaotic climate. I think it's succinct and
chaotic climate.
Yeah, I love it.
Let's do it.
Most libraries have a purchase suggestion form said by my best friend from high school, Anna Cheddar, who is a librarian.
Thank you, Anna.
All right, look at all these ideas.
Oh, this is great.
Look what's happening. Oh, Anna, I love you too.
Oh.
All right. Unfortunately, we've come to time, but we still need to move our bodies because we touched a lot of really big and heavy feels. You're hesitating.
Well, no, I was just going to say how excited I am that so many people stayed on for the 2 hours. That is such a gift to us. And especially like having so many people we know mixed in with people we don't know, mixed in with family, friends, people from high school. Like it just is, it's such a gift. This is the best book release day I could ever ask for. So thank you. And y'all are a part of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for showing up for us. Chelsie, do you have any closing remarks?
My closing remark is just for Stephanie, actually, who asked about a book discussion guide. There is some in the book about how you can read this book in community and kind of not replicate, but sort of the experience of, coming to one of the Good Grief Network groups together and coming together with other people who are reading the book. So there is a community section in the book that may help you read it.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsie.
And my other closing remark is thank you so much for inviting me to this project. I know I've said it to you all a million times, but it really truly is an honor and something I'm really proud of, and you all should be really proud of too. So I'm excited to see it in the world finally.
Thank you, Chelsie.
Thank you. We love you so much.
Yes.
And thank you, Ray, for showing up for us and for engaging in some conversation with us. Thank you, everyone who has helped us get to this point and help uplift our work or facilitate our work. We are so much stronger in community, and hope that the book makes that case for community. Okay.
And thank you to Sarah JS for helping with tech and helping run Good Grief Network.
Well, and
big shout out and showing up sick.
Yes, that's the biggest thing. Sarah's not feeling well and she's still swooped in. And
we didn't even know she was going to do tech support. It was a lovely surprise. And yeah,
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm very grateful.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. I have a quick announcement, which is that we had a vote for the hashtag in the comments, and what won is hashtag chaotic climate book. And that is to distinguish it from the regular chaotic climate that we live in.
That makes sense.
Just the everyday chaotic
Yeah.
climate.
Yeah, well, perfect. Thank you.
It sounds great. All right. For those of you who can stay,
We know we took you to the full time, but we are going to dance to two songs regardless. So if you want to join us, please do, because we're going to keep the camera on and just dance.